This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Karyn Reece, and you're a celebrity psychic medium. And we're going to talk to you about your story and what you've been doing lately. But want to welcome you to the Fam Electric Ghost podcast. And how you doing tonight?
Oh, good. And thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, it's always fun to talk to new people. And we've got your website up, www.karynreece.com. That will be fully
Mhm.
clickable. People don't have to remember that. You'll be able to click through on that on all the places that we're published. We're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch right now. But that will be fully clickable. And we're also on Newsly. So later tonight, you'll be able to hear our audio only version of the podcast. You can check out that with coupon code GHOST. For everybody who's never checked that out, you can check that out on Newsly. But again, thank you for being on the show. We're going to talk about this topic here, transform your life by using intuition or psychic abilities, and where we can speak to that. Before we get to that though, I always ask a couple questions of every guest. What motivates you and why do you do what you do?
Oh, I love that question. I was born this way, runs on my mom's side of the family. I've always used it. I think that this energy actually pulls you into it. Now, along the way, I've been a stockbroker. I worked in business. I mean, for the last 20 years, I've been in my own practice, but I enjoy helping people, helping to transform people's lives, whether it's through mediumship or through something, psychic related. And I think right now people feel lost. So I do a lot of work with law enforcement too. So I often enjoy seeing the results. If I work with murder cases in those particular instances. But it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun too. And just day to day activities, seeing how, you can help people, reach their goals and change their lives, especially now. We need more
That's
that, that more than
well, you
ever.
need people to have. Yeah, there's a lot of despair, and if you have
Mhm.
abilities, whatever ability anybody has, they can kind of lift people up or assist people. When did you first realize you were psychic?
Um, you know, I always saw dead people and I would see the future. And my mom would say things like, oh, I saw Uncle John or, whatever, there's going to be a train crash. So I thought it was normal, but it was at the age of 7 that I realized that, not everybody makes predictions. And I predicted my dad's passing and he passed away 3 weeks later, unexpectedly of a stroke. And that's when,
Wow.
fortunately, my grandmother was in town, and she was very psychic and very spiritual. I'm very spiritual too. That I realized not everybody has that ability. It is a little awkward moments though when you become a teenager, but that's a whole nother story. Awkward teenage moments, but just saying.
Yeah, 'cause that's the thing is like when you're a teenager, there's so much bullying, and if you're exposed to like a high school, junior high school crowd, you had that ability. I'm sure like you'd have people in your corner and other people probably not in your corner.
Oh my God, exactly. And I grew up in a very diverse environment. That's my family. Plus, I grew up in a inner city. So, we've always had, friends of all different. So you learn a lot. But I'll tell you, it's really awkward when you're sitting in class and the heartthrob's father just passed and you get called on and your teacher, you're in 8th grade, like history class or social studies. And, this gentleman's father standing there and you kind of blurt out about Paul's father being passed and you're like, oh my God. And he looked at me because they didn't know at the time. I mean, my family, I'm not the only person in my family that does
Mhm.
this, and there's men and
Wow.
women too. Yeah. So welcome to the clubhouse. Just saying,
So at such an early age, did you try to channel it to do certain things, or you know, were you very upfront about it with your friends, or did you hide it, or were you very? It sounds like you were upfront about it.
with some of my friends, yeah. I mean, it wasn't like it was I mean, it was there. And I guess, when you grow up around it, I wasn't educated per se, although my mom would walk around and say things. My dad was just the opposite. When he was, in the earth plane, he was an engineer, Mensa member. So like two different like sides of the worlds. But I mean, I wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't like something that always was front and center. I'd go grocery shopping
Mhm.
for an example with my mom, and I'd see like some dead people following, like a husband following a wife. I might see something the very next day, something would occur, like I don't know, bridge collapse or whatever. So, I think it's like radio waves, and I've seen into the future. Like I saw my husband, I predicted him when I was 14. I saw his face, just all sorts of stuff along the way. And it's funny, things don't always happen at once, but they trickle in.
Mhm.
at various times. So, but I always say, don't tell your doctor you hear voices in your head and you see dead people. Just
No,
from,
they'll put you on meds.
not
They'll put
good,
you on
right?
meds and they'll put you somewhere. Yeah, 'cause the whole problem with the psychiatry and psychologists is like, "Oh, that's not normal." They'll put you like, well, on the spectrum, "Oh, you need to be on meds." And then they'll
Oh my
suppress all your abilities, because like they can't understand it. It's kind of like, if I'm a part Cherokee, and if you try to talk a lot of mystic stuff, they might do the same thing. They might like, what are you talking about? Like what?
exactly. Surprise, right now, you know?
Yeah, they can't handle like mystic stuff. I lived in Tokyo for like 2 years back in 2004, 2006, and there's
Wow.
a lot of mysticism in the East, and
Yeah,
it's
there
kind of
is.
like it's just part of the spirit animals, and people just feeling that. They have this connection to their ancestors, a lot of connection to history. Even in Tokyo, with all these modern buildings, you have these ancient like temples in the middle of parks, and people would be in there, meditating during the middle of the day. And it's a different type of like society. It's like at the Eastern perspective. So
That's
like a
really
Shintoism,
cool.
things like that. It's like a different mindset. So they're more willing to entertain those things. Just like the
Mhm.
Cherokee, it's part of the culture, that they entertain things that are not seen but understood.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, I'm in Buffalo, so we have like a lot of Native Americans here, and I have family members that are Native Americans, and I think like the whole appreciation for that is definitely something to be said. And the
did,
different
did
angles. I wish we did more of it, though.
Did you ever run into people that are just so against that because they think it's
Mhm.
against their religion, or it's against their
Oh,
mind, their
God.
worldview, and then they want to say, "Well, you're going the wrong direction. You're going toward like the evil or something," because they can't
Yes.
understand it. They want to paint it like witchcraft or evil, and they can't like let it be. They have to tell
Oh
you
my
like, "Oh, you
God.
need."
Oh, I've been attacked before for that. I laugh. I'm like, you're not practicing what you preach. Thou shalt not judge. Maybe you should go back to whatever church or temple school 101. And when you think about it, though, it's all about the intention. I tell people, like, is this a good intention? It's like buying drugs. You can buy them on the corner, not a good intention. Go to the pharmacy, that's a good intention. But it's about the intention. But when you hear in the Bible, behold, John saw a vision, I'm like, duh. I remember when I was 7, I had an aunt, and I remember saying, I knew that my father was going to die. I kept getting this vision, and she was of this like crazy Christian religion. And she's like, "If that's the devil." And I looked at her, I said, "Well, why would God let the devil bother a kid? And if you really believe in God, God created everything, including the negative energies. So I believe so firmly in God that I'm not worried about negative energies. I've experienced them. I've helped get people to, get them out of
Mhm.
their lives, exorcisms. In fact, I've got a connection with an exorcist I'll put you in touch with. But I mean, if you
Mhm.
really believe in God, isn't that what it's all about? Have faith, right? Believe in God, and God created negative. Let God take care of it.
What's
And
the
that's what He
universe
did.
like? Yeah, I mean, the
Yeah,
whole idea is, well, there's energies, if you think about the universe, I come from a more
yeah,
Buddhist perspective, but there's this whole idea of like you're being in tune with like the frequencies of the universe, right? And there's humans are putting out frequencies, and there's
yes,
there's frequencies that we can't hear. My cat can hear these frequencies I can't hear, and sometimes she'll voice
exactly.
stuff and you can't hear it because it's really super high pitch. And so just because you don't hear it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so once you start to realize there's types of light you can't see, there's types of sound you can't hear. So you start to
Microwave.
realize there's a lot of stuff. There's all this stuff, and some people are more in tune with frequencies, and they can pick
Yeah.
up those frequencies, and that's how they know things are there, or they feel the vibes. And so that's totally, you know, it's science, but you don't want to think it's science, but it is. And it's just maybe
Oh
you
my God.
can't believe it. But it's spiritual too. And so there's a lot of convergence between spirituality, kind of, things that you can't explain,
Oh
and
my
and
God.
then science. And so it's all kind of connected to me. It's like, so like why not? And then there's
And that's
faith. And then you have to, okay.
well, you know what I think it's when you
Yeah.
get the extremes, but it's so true because there's Doctor Doty, or yeah, Doty. I think that's how James Doty, but he's a neurosurgeon. And, he believes in this aspect. I mean, there's some airy fairy stuff about it, but I think the core that you and I do um, definitely confirms that it exists. I tell people it's like a radio wave. You can't see it, or a microwave, but it exists. When it comes to technology, cell phones, it's packets of information that your voice gets on. Like our voices right now, we're going back and forth. I mean, we could see
Yeah,
each other,
imagine
but
what
how does it
people
transition?
if you
You
showed
know?
a cell phone to somebody back in the Salem age, right?
Oh
They were
my
like,
God.
You're a witch. You're a witch. You're a warlock. Like, what are you doing?" It's like, how can you have this magic?" It's like what, and so it's like, okay, just tech can seem, if future tech comes from somewhere else, and then suddenly, oh, that's magic. Like okay, you just have to have some kind of suspension of disbelief, but that's where I think people make mistakes. They get too narrow. If you get too narrow, if you
Yes.
get more willing to be expansive, because
Yep.
like we're in the age of like all these things could be happening. We've seen things happen we never expected, right? There's all
Oh
kinds
my
of things that can happen, and
Well,
so to have such a narrow point of view is kind of like what age are we living in?
exactly. And you look at the greatest minds too, the greatest minds, whether it's Richard Branson or Jeff, Bezos or Oprah Winfrey and, so on and so forth. They use their intuition, the pit in their stomach, the whatever, which is psychic 101 that helps to
Yeah, the
drive
gut.
and direct. Exactly.
Yeah,
I'm like,
it's that
and I
gut
have
feel.
exactly. And I'm very proponent of like science. I started in science in college. And then in my first year, I saw an advertisement to be a stockbroker. I was a poor kid. So I got my stockbroker's license. So I switched it to business. So I'm very left brain about a lot of stuff. But at the same time, like it is what it is. And we're all going to be there someday. So, FYI on that,
Well,
so
it's
yeah.
good, a lot of times, like as an artist, we have our left and right brain, right? So you're right,
Yeah.
you kind of have that dichotomy where, the arts is like, okay, well, you're then totally into the foo and the kind of like in the moment, in the flow state, but then you got to sell it. So then you
Yes.
have to have marketing, you got to be you have to figure out how to do business.
Yep.
So,
Exactly.
sometimes you can't do it. Some artists is like, I can't do business at all. So they got to give it to somebody else. But the idea is like, if you have that intuition, that gut feel, and a lot of creators will have that. It's like, I know it when I hear it. I know it when I see it. And
Yes.
right now I don't feel it. So it's like, well, how do you put that into a formula? Because everybody went, oh, I want the formula. It's like, well, feel is hard to put into the formula. It's either gonna feel right or it's not.
Exactly, exactly. It's so true. Well, I wanted to be a plastic surgeon because I was artistically gifted. I used to do portraits, which occasionally I do for business, but I was smart in science and math, so I could see that. And like Einstein too, when you think about Einstein and Edison, in the underground in our world, they were very psychic. Mozart, they would intuit a lot of their theories or their musical compositions, and voila. And
Mhm.
like you're psychic when you're in that zone. So if you're doing something like, and it just sort of like rolls, and sometimes you're intuiting it without even knowing it. So like if you're a good cook, that wouldn't be me, but just saying as an example, you could roll in it. So it's interesting. Something we all have that we should expand more on. Good
Yeah,
for
it was interesting
negotiation.
because oh yeah, because I'm wondering, like, when you were in business, stockbroking, if you have that intuition, like, a lot of people feel like, well, these people are on a lucky streak. It's like you were using like your left and right brain. Like you got your business side, you got all these business theories, you got all these economic theories. You can learn all that from book learning. But then you got to have that kind of feel, like, how do I really, the intuition that you just pick up the vital. This is the right thing to do. So were you kind of
Exactly.
using that ability while you're working?
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's funny. I think the thing is like when you feel you're lucky, sometimes you're just getting stuff. Like last week, I'm like, I haven't played scratch offs in a while. I'm like, I'm gonna win at least $50. I'll get two tickets. I think I'm gonna actually, So I'm like, I grabbed two tickets. And most people say they're feeling lucky, but I'm like, yeah, I am feeling lucky, but I'm intuiting that I know I'm gonna have this as a winner. And lo and behold, of
Mhm,
course, I won both scratch offs. I got $100 and paid like 60, I'm up 40. But I don't do it a lot, but it's fun. Or like the
mhm,
one time my uncle was going to Vegas and I said, I don't see you winning, play these 5 out of the 7 numbers, which you want on a lottery ticket, which then I see him like a lottery ticket, so he won it. But I always tell people we always have that ability to tap when you feel it or you get a lot of coincidences or repetition. Like, for instance, if you keep getting like the song Walk Like an Egyptian, and then you see an Egyptian advertisement for like maybe like an Egyptian show, and then you see the History Channel, and you keep getting these repetitions, anything Egyptian, and then all of a sudden, you're at the casino and you see an Egyptian slot machine, you want to play because you're going to win. I mean, always look for consistency and repetition, and people get it without realizing it. So I think that's fun.
Yeah, because your mind is doing stuff. Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of people, if you're actually listening, like a lot of people don't listen to their intuition. They don't listen to
Yes,
their vibes, and they go against it because then they might have this mindset where they have some dogma that they got from their
exactly.
parents, that they got from the preacher, or they got from this, right? And so then they go against their intuitive self. And I've
Yeah,
run this to this with like musicians. Like you got a musician, they've been playing 30, 20 years. Like they know what note they're on. And then they start saying, well,
exactly.
what then they say, well, what key is it in? It's like, well, you know the key, you can hear it. Like, why do you have to even ask? Like, where you know what it is, right? And then like you don't
Exactly.
trust yourself. It's like, why are you like second guessing something that's like muscle memory? You already know it. And then
Exactly.
the doubt,
Exactly.
and then you have all kinds of trouble. You got to keep on starting and stopping because then you don't go with your flow. You start
Yeah.
getting uncomfortable with your own capability, and it's like, well, don't you know how to do that? You were supposed to know how to do that. And then they lose it. You lose it because you get the doubt because they don't. You'll start trying to be perfect, and you're like, just be. Like if you just like let it
Love
be,
that.
like the Beatles, like it will
I'm
happen. But
just
if you like over analyze an art, like it kills it. Like a lot of times, if you
so
over
true.
totally wreck it.
I love that. Maybe you're channeling, Paul McCartney and John Lennon together. Let it be. I love that. Phantom, that's perfect. But it's true. What you said is absolutely true. And it's a good point too. So yeah, it's kind of fun.
So is your belief that everybody is psychic and intuitive, and maybe they kind of block it?
That's a good question. I think everybody has some sort of psychic ability. You can call it intuition, which is your baseline, that pit in your stomach. Something feels off. Maybe I should do this or that. We all get that, right? I don't know why I'm sensing, I feel this way, whatever. Some might get dreams. And then there's others that have elevated. And it's like any, type of skill set or talent, whatever you want to call it. Some have it more than others, but some people can do better math than basic math. Some people can draw stick figures. Some people are Da Vinci. So there's
Mhm.
variations. I think the key though is all mediums, which communicate to the other side, are psychic, but not all psychics, which see past, present, and future, are mediums. Like when I do my work, I don't use cards. I don't, I mean, I just get like little TV screens. So I might see somebody's past, something into the future, which I always tell people, people you can change, um, or dead people. I mean, one of the fallacies I find that bothers me in the industry when you get psychics that say, I can't connect to so and so because they haven't been on the other side long enough. I'm like, what are they, like a cake? You're cooking it? Really? Like I've had people the same day come to me,
You
or
gotta make it long enough.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, yeah, So it's crazy. Of course, I tell people I don't eat steak because I was burned at the stake, but that's because I was a witch in a past life or a psychic. But people come up with all these crazy loony things. And they make people like us look so like untapped. And I'm like, yeah, no, 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 no. Or they come up with all this mystic, craziness. And I'm like, yeah, no, you got to go with your gut feeling. And, I always tell people, like when I read people, I just start tuning in, whatever comes in, get a little validation of this or that, and then a little bit about the future, and then whoever. And I get like a whole wheelhouse. Some things are going to make sense, some things won't. Those are predictions, and then dead people. So I get like the full, thing. But I think there's a lot of misinformation about the industry, and
Well,
people
I
all want
started
to be.
we're living in an age of total misinformation because like information
True.
can be so
Mm-hmm.
manipulated. Like I'm in
Mm-hmm.
IT, right? And now with AI, it's ridiculous because you can make something look like it happened and it didn't happen. You can make people say things they never said. You can make them look like they were in places they were never were. And so it's very tricky because there's so much stuff that can be manipulated. There's like
Oh
what
my.
is actually what reality. You start getting into Camus and you start getting into philosophy. Like, if that tree falls in the forest and you didn't hear it, did it really fall? Did you, But now you can manipulate even that.
That's crazy, and I gotta be honest, I do love AI in a lot of ways because I just think it simplifies, but we've been AIing with Google for a long time. But, I mean, I love all of the positive. I mean, yeah, some of the stuff I mean, it's like, I guess with anything, you're always gonna have some, bad players,
Yeah,
but it is kinda cool. But when you think about it,
yeah,
like, how quickly it's evolving, like, every 100 years, we're really accelerating things, like 100 years ago, our eyes just now see shades of blue that we didn't, see 100 years ago theoretically. I don't know how they say that it works, but and then there used to be a book called Future Memory. God, it was written about 20, 30 years ago. You might have read it, Phantom, but I can't remember who the author was. But a lot of what was in that book is in this. And then you look at like cells. You've probably seen this, and they take cancer cells and they use the vibrational qualities and they sound like acid rock. Then you take healthy cells and they vibrate out at classical music, which again, that
yeah.
goes all into I like
Harmony.
it's just
It's
so
like
cool.
harmony. Yeah, it's like there's
Yeah.
like in frequencies, like there's disharmony, there's dissonance, there's noise,
Yes.
there's so like what we find is like as a musician, like if you do something that's very harmonious, people will kind of go into a wave. Right? People, if you're playing
Mhm.
live, people will take the candles out and they'll take the lighters out and they'll all be like peaceful. But if you go to a punk rock show and you do that kind of really jagged, jarring, people are like thrashing each other and almost like fighting each other. So you can get into frequencies that can cause different behaviors. And so the frequencies based on kind of where they go in the spectrum cause different responses. And after time, you learn it's like, oh, if I use these frequencies with these beats, human beings will tend to act like this. And then you're like,
Isn't
oh, I can get a hit.
it's like hypnotic commercials. Like I'll do put people occasionally regressions if they want to do regression, but I use my voice to inflect. But what you just said is really profound because people don't even realize that, and being a musician like you are, which I have no musical talent at all, but the effects on people, like how you can really get, the sheep following, so to speak, you know. I think that's
Yeah, it's
just
just interesting
everything's
because you can do it like, actors figure it out. People who do public speaking, they figure it out. Like your voice is an instrument. And so
Mhm.
it's not just the guitar and piano. It's like once you realize what your power is, and a lot of people don't understand their power. They don't
Yeah.
understand the power of the words. They don't understand the frequency or the volume or the intonation or the way they do it, right? It's actually very powerful and you can trigger things and you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
get people
that's
to respond, but like you have to understand like sociology and psychology and other things to kind of understand how to use it. And other people
mhm.
like unconsciously use it and they might be even a master at it without even really understanding how they did it, but they
Yeah.
can do it and they can just figure it out. And he's like, oh wow, this person is able to like be a leader and they get all these people following. It's like why? Because they're keying in on a frequency and they're the people are like they're tapping into it.
Yeah, that is so, so true. It's funny, you must be psychic because I was just talking to somebody today. We were talking about like, different cult thinking and all of the above. And they do it, that makes perfect sense how you can actually, lead people, just through all the frequencies. And like attracts like too, which is always
Yeah, it's like
interesting.
a law of attraction. It's like the law of
Yeah.
attraction is like you have negativity can attract negativity, positivity attracts positivity, and you can kind of expand to be exponential on it. What levels you do that. It's just interesting when you started to like maybe go from just doing like Wall Street and then deciding, hey, when did you decide you're going to go all in with your psychic capabilities and say, well, I'm just going to be who I am.
Oh,
That's
that's
gonna be
great.
what I do.
Well, I loved cold calling. I know that sounds sick, but I thought it was fun back in the day. And I did it for about 5 years. I was the youngest female stockbroker at the time in Buffalo. I was like my first semester in college. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to waitress my way. I'm a poor kid. So I did it for 5 years and I was in the money business or maybe a little bit longer than that. And then just one day my guide said, you know what? Um, you need to quit and go full time. And I'm like, what are you nuts? They said your business will snowball. And my business is word of mouth. So which is great. And I was at a house and there was just some issues going on and I'm like, this is ridiculous. So I quit and then literally within the following week my business started to double. So I got really busy right away and I didn't even try, it just started to snowball. So I think what happens, speaking of energy, like attracts like, you get into this frequency and, where you're supposed to be is where you go as long as you're open to it. This industry picks you because, like, when I was a kid, I'm like, oh, yeah, I knew I was always going to do readings. I knew when I was 7, I was going to be on national TV. But I always thought, I'll do it like when I'm retired, and I'm, like an old lady and I could have a crystal ball, like, all that, along the way. I thought, well, maybe I'll do law school, which I took exams for that. And, you know how it is. And but, the industry actually pushed me. I mean, the energy pulled me into it. And it was funny because I always said I'm going to be on national TV before I was on local TV. And I was selected out of, I think it was like one out of, I don't know, 2000 psychics that had tried out for the first national show that I did. And, you had to do a reading, you had to do camera, and they interviewed a ton of people. So I ended up getting selected. But I'm known for like names and numbers and dates and times because the one thing about the industry, there's a lot of vague information too with a lot of psychics. Not to say that it's not relevant or it's not applicable
Mhm.
because it can be, but I'm very specific. So I do like first name, last name,
Yeah.
best friend,
So,
whatever. And consistently. And it's not
yeah, so
just
you're
like,
more accurate. It's like,
yeah,
yeah, well, if you can show, it's like can you show me? It's the show me
yeah,
state,
yeah,
like when you actually can get deliver, it's like anything. If you're a
yeah,
creative, like and you can deliver the hook, then you get more work.
yeah.
So if you can actually do it, then it's like, okay, well, I can think about doing it, but do you actually do it?
Exactly, exactly,
You know?
exactly, and being comfortable to be, like, thrown in, like, I can just, like, be thrown into anything, an audience or whatever, and I'm like, "Yeah, I could roll with it," and people will say, "What do you do about skeptics?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's really not my job to convince them." I've read a lot of skeptics, which I think is kind of
Mhm.
funny, but I mean, I'm like, "Whatever, just take it for what it is, just be polite, you don't have to, just be polite," and usually, at some point, like, "Oh my god." I had somebody recently that I did a reading for a man and he came in under a different name and all this other information. And I'm like, oh, and who's this? And I stated his first and last name.
His
And
real name.
we laughed. Yeah, I was like, busted, and thank God I have a good
That's
sense of
pretty good.
humor. Yeah, I've worked with a lot of guys. I grew up with a lot of guys, a lot of different friends growing up. So I don't know, I could roll with just about anybody, I guess. So I don't get too intimidated. I like to have fun. Why not? Life's too
Yeah,
bloody short. And I'm short
and
too.
you were talking about, like, mediums and the, ability to kind of speak to people on the other side. How much of that have you been, is part of your work?
um, I would say it's effective. Every time I read, I usually will have somebody from the other side come in. Um, sometimes people will want to, their reading may be more involved, say something current like a career, but usually I have a person from the other side. It's almost every single reading that'll come in. And they'll also give me information because when you're on the other side, you can see, the past, present, and future. So, you might have somebody's brother and he may relate to me that his sister just got a new job. She works in healthcare. Her best friend is Betsy, and I'll go on and on. And then I'll see like TV screens. So it's like a big party. And then I'll get dead people in my dreams the night before, which is even weirder. I'm like, or in the morning, like I'm getting ready. I'm like, can't they do the bloody dishes? So I get visitors. It's great. My life is just crazy. It sounds like I should be on something, but I think I'm more normal than the other people. What do you think there, Phantom? I'm just saying. I think I gotta go to a good doctor.
It makes sense to me because there's a whole idea, like, a lot of times, if you're spiritual, you have these, like, waking dreams, and a lot of times as
Hmm.
artists, we feel like we can channel, right? So as an artist,
Yeah.
like, I'm channeling something that is coming from the muse or it's coming from, like, the universe. You get a guy like a
Exactly.
Jimi Hendrix, he used to talk about, like, "I'm channeling from the universe," and he said, "What are you talking
Yeah.
about?" He's like, he'd be in the middle of a recording session with, like, Little Richard or the Isley Brothers and suddenly go off and do
Oh,
some Hendrixian thing that doesn't fit what they're doing, and they would say, "What is that?" And it's like, "The universe gave it to me, and I had to put it down." And I mean, what the heck does that mean? But that's what he could do. He could channel, and if it
yeah.
came, he wasn't gonna not put it down. He's like, "I gotta put it down because it came right now." And then people were like, "Well, that's not being disciplined." It's like, "Well, guess I'm not disciplined." So,
Take it or leave it. Yeah. But I mean, it goes
it's
to
what
show
it
you, and
is,
that exactly. And it just shows proof of the pudding because look how he was so successful and he was just so like totally on point and he lived what he was supposed to do. That's the one thing that we don't always follow, but yeah, I mean, that's always something. And you hear about that all the time with artists. It's so cool.
Yeah,
Again, we
when
just
you
don't
get
take
it's
it.
it's being able to kind of channel like, hey, I'm pulling something from the nether world, I'm pulling something from ancestors, I'm pulling something from the future. There's this
Mhm.
ability to be willing to accept it. Where sometimes
Exactly.
it's like I think a lot of people like they might have an inkling of it and it's well, it's wrong. Or they feel shame about it. They don't want to try it because they're scared of it. So
Yep.
you never felt scared of what you're doing, right? You felt like it was comfortable.
Yeah, like I remember seeing like when I was in my crib, this woman Margaret. So I was never really uncomfortable. Even when I've seen like I've got a case going on right now with somebody that has this very haunted situation, a mask that they ended up buying, whatever. So I don't really get scared. I'm more concerned about the living than I am about the spirit world. Because
Mhm.
again, I think it goes back to the belief system. If you really believe in God, which I do, I'm not religious, but I do believe in God. I put my faith there, and God has created negative, so God can take care of the negativity. That's the way I look at it. And when I encounter things, there's just a way of letting people know. I will say one thing that I love is when you look at like Travel Channel and a lot of the stations that are out there without the video cam, that you can actually see different types of whether they're ghosts or just weird stuff that's not of this world. I think it's great because it's really starting to demonstrate that there's more that we can actually confirm exists beyond the normal senses, which is good for most people to relate to. Well,
Yeah, yeah, beyond what we can see with our eye. I mean, you look in outer space, there's all this energy. There's all
yeah.
these energy forms, these clouds and like rays and strobing light forms. And it's like, well, those are those like spirits, are those souls? And like, what is that? And it's like, and if you start thinking about what's out there, even on our planet and not in space, there's all this
Yeah.
stuff that sometimes people feel it. I had a cousin and he could pick up on things like he could see my grandpa. My grandpa was dead, and he would
Oh,
see him when we would go visit West Virginia because he's a coal miner in Morgantown,
oh,
and he passed, and he's like he would see him in the house in his old farmhouse, and and some of the family were like, what are you talking about? And I kind of didn't like put it down. I say I think he really does see it,
yep.
and it really depends on how your family, like, if they kind of know, "Oh, that's nonsense," and they wanna push it down, it's like whether or not you continue to kinda embrace it or not.
Oh, so true. There's so much truth to that. And it's nice that more and more people don't think you're nuts, when you see dead people, at least in my experience. But it's at least people, and it's just like in hospitals too. I mean, how many times do you go to hospital and or you hear of stories somebody's on their deathbed or they're sick and they say, oh, grandma was here and oh, grandma's been gone however long, or you get photos too. So um, I
Mhm.
remember one time I did an investigation for a castle in Albany, New York, which is about 5 hours from Buffalo. And the gentleman says, go here, do this, do that. Didn't tell me anything, which is fine because I don't want to know anything until I actually do my thing. And it was funny the entire time I had this owner from the 18, I think that was built in like the 1860s. It converted to a castle and it became a restaurant. And when I walked up, I saw the gentleman in a wheelchair, like maybe turn of the century, an old man, and he followed me the entire time. And the gentleman that I was with actually had him on um, recording saying, Karen, Karen. I'm like, yeah, too bad he didn't say, I'm going to come home and do the dishes, take your car for an oil change, but like the entire time. And I could hear him and I would see him as I like went through. I'm like, okay. The only thing I don't like though is if they wake me up in the middle of the night. I was out in LA on business a couple months ago. I'm laying in my bed and I had an ensuite. I'm talking to a friend, 10 in the morning or 10 at night. I see this guy's legs go by, and all of a sudden he turns on the light, and you have to go to the wall and you have to flip up the switch. I go, now I have to get out of bed.
Mhm.
So I get out of bed, I turn it down. Well, I
You
get
turn
ready to go to bed. Yeah. I was like so
uh,
pissed. I get to bed, I start to fall asleep. Well, Mr. Hot stuff of the night was there. He starts pulling my legs and he's trying to pull me off the bed, which takes a lot of energy. And I'm like, you need to stop that now. And people are like, were you afraid? I go, no, I was too bloody tired. But my mother was like that too, if she would get visitors. So, I mean, just tell them, go away.
mhm.
People are people. I guess it's the thing.
'Cause you're probably
You're a
because 'cause you're
person.
in tune.
Right. And,
Yeah, I mean,
I
it's like yeah, I mean, it sounds like the law of attraction, like, if you're in tune, you're gonna they're gonna come to you, right?
exactly. Exactly. But like I said, too bad if they can't do the bloody dishes. But And that brings to the other point, because a lot of times people are like, well, is my grandmother a butterfly? I'm like, no, listen, here's the way it works. Your physical is like a pair of clothes. You look fabulous. Like I go out of body a lot and I'll stand next to my body. When you leave your physical, you're still you. So your perspective may change, when you're out of your body and you're connecting to the landscapes and you're looking at your life review and you're whatever. But if you're a moron here, you're a moron there. I know you don't turn into a butterfly. I know you're not a bird. Although a bird might get your attention. You might say, that cardinal is my father. No, 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 no. Your father's standing next to you. It's just a frame of reference to quiet your mind. So that's another misunderstanding that's out there. So
Mm.
yeah, I've got all sorts of them. You just saying. But anyways,
But you had said you had worked with law enforcement at some point, helping them on certain things. Like what type of engagements?
I get murder cases a lot, some of which have been on high profile. It's sort of sad. Sometimes they don't want to go on record. There was a show one time that they were going to air on national, but a lot of times law enforcement personnel, and I can understand to some extent, they don't want to be on air with a psychic, but I will work behind the scenes, identifying and cracking
Mhm.
cases, cold cases, existing cases. And I've actually gone into the mind of the murder, which is really weird. I actually got called for jury duty. This is really creepy. I knew I was going to get called again. I'm like, really? And I'm like, it's a murder case. And I'm like, in the name, there's like three suspects. And I heard the one kid's last name. And what was really creepy, and I haven't been called in a while, so I thought, well, I'll just go in there and say, haha, you don't want me because, I'm a psychic. I'm going to know everything. Anyways, I get called. I'm down there. And I did not know, if you have a murder case, you're in front of the defendant. So I'm like, well, I better not say, I'll know if these kids are wrong or right, because I don't want, a problem. So fortunately, I got out of it. But in between the time that I told the judge I can't do it, and I told mine, he's like, I know, I heard of you, blah, blah. We were all laughing. I had heard the last name, but the one kid that I heard his last name was sitting 2 rows in front, and I'm like, I really wanted to go up and hit him in the head and say, "Your mother would not be happy about it." But I was seeing the whole imagery of what him and his, 2 knucklehead friends did. So I'm like seeing this what
That
happened,
done.
and I'm
Oh
like,
wow.
"Here we go." Yeah, and I'm experiencing what he was experiencing. They were young, stupid kids, and it was a drug issue, but surprisingly. But, I'm seeing the whole thing. I've had other instances where if I'm working on a case, I might be victim and I'll feel what she has experienced. Or if it's a perpetrator, I'll go into the mind of the existing perpetrator and I'll actually sense, feel, and it's interesting because it's taught me how people's moods are different. Like your feeling of laughter may feel differently to me. So it's a weird place,
Mm.
because we sometimes think, oh, we're both laughing at the same thing or we're both happy, but the way we actually feel it, our emotions, it's a totally different, state. But
Oh, it's
I'll
more like
experience.
empathetic, like an empath that you can feel exactly what they
Yeah,
felt.
yeah, exactly, and I can get excited and, or whatever their emotional states are, and but even their emotional states, their feelings of excitement is different than my feelings, so I could feel how they feel, but their feelings, not because they're different feelings, but the way that I can sense the feeling is different than the way I interpret it with my emotional, state, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's the weirdest
Because it's
way of
not
describing
you. I mean,
it.
you're actually kind of picking up their individuality because every human
Yes.
being's different, right? So it sounds like you're picking up their
Yeah.
their 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 the kind of thing that makes them unique. It's like that kind of imprint. Like everybody has this imprint that makes them not the same as anybody else. But you seem to have the
Yeah.
ability, from what you're saying, to pick up on that and realize it's like that's not how I interpret it. It's actually how they interpret it.
Exactly, exactly. And I always try to tell people we're all spirits having a human experience, and so watch your behavior. Treat people and animals the way you want to be treated, because you never know in your next lifetime. But that being said, when I'm working on these cases, it's really weird. But it is what it is. It works, and then I have fun with everybody. There's all sorts of. It's interesting, and I think the type of work that you and I are engaged in, you've got your feelers out, you're always sensing things, you sense on a global basis, you sense on a person. I try to tell people, well, it's a learning curve, sometimes it's God's way of preparing you when you get,
Mhm.
psychic things. So it's insane, I guess.
That's interesting because, like, I always kind of talk about like the microcosm and the macrocosm, the kind of
Mhm.
sociological terms. But like the microcosm is like individual connections, like from a
Yes.
sociological perspective, and then the macrocosm is like the societal kind of group behavior. right? Because it could go, like how you behave in groups or how nations behave versus like how families like or individuals in a relationship that's like microcosm level. So like you can see these bigger patterns and they can kind of go back and forth. They can, the microcosm can inform the macrocosm kind of informs the microcosm. So it's two-way street.
Yes. That's a good way of describing it, but it's so like right on point. It's like so right. And we're all interconnected. That's where people miss it. So like when you get to the other side, it's real easy to see and connect in and say, oh, like it's like a big giant world web on the other side, spiritual web, which is insane.
Like these bigger connections, is that really like mind opening? Because like some people are so kind of in our world,
Mhm.
they like to stay in narrow lanes. They like to stay on their own channel. They want to
Yep.
stay where it's comfortable, where it's safe. But it seems like
Yes.
once you break through some walls or break through barriers, then it might appear to be like unsafe to somebody. It's kind of,
Mhm.
oh, that's beyond like what I'm comfortable with. But it seems like you're more willing to explore that.
That is a really true statement. And what the thing is, I think that's the whole point of living is to experience, and experience teaches us. We learn about ourselves, how we contrast what we do, the decisions we make, what are our intentions. And so many people, like you say, they want to do it safe. They all want to be like this and that, but it's bigger than that. They all want to stay here instead of expanding. People don't like change, and change, is definitely a growth opportunity. And, people don't realize,
Scary.
yeah, exactly. You got it. And people, you can't always change what you have, but you can try to change your reaction. I tell people energy moves forward. So you're not really stuck. You may feel stuck because we've all been there, but then when you really look at the bigger picture, is this a big problem or a little problem? Can I unstick myself and let's get a strategy? We all have the power within, but so many people just take it safe and easy. And I'm like, well, then you're going to have 1,000 more, lifetimes to live. If you're not growing. Me, I'd rather be on the fast program like you, Phantom. Let's get on the
Yeah,
fast program.
I
That's
think
where we
there's
are,
I think they're scared of making mistakes, but like the whole point, like if
Yeah,
you're a creator, like it is inherent in what you do that you're gonna break some eggs, like to make the cake, right? As an artist,
right.
like I don't know how many demos I do before I get to where I want to be. Right? How many takes somebody does when they're an artist, right? How many versions of something they do, and you don't look at it as like, well, that's a failure. Like you learn from the things that maybe didn't work yesterday, but if you don't totally become dejected by it, you can take that forward, and something that you did 5 years ago could work now because it's actually now it's the right time, and you
Yeah.
just don't get dejected. You continually perfect or expand and willing to make mistakes. Right? I call them happy accidents. Like if you're willing to
I
kind of
love
have the
that.
happy accident, then you're willing to embrace. Well, I don't know if that's going to go over, but I'm going to try it. And I think if you have your mind in that way, then you're probably going to pick up more frequencies because you're
Yeah.
not saying, "Well, that's not right. This isn't right. That don't like." If you're real willing to take a shot and say, "Well, but why not do that? What's the problem? What is anybody going to say? What does it matter what they say?"
Right. Exactly. I love it. Or like Les Brown, what does he say? Shoot for the moon, you land in the stars, or however. But it's so true. And I love exactly what you said. And people should embrace what you just said because it's really true. Life's too bloody short. Like, just give it a shot. Try it. And timing, too. You just mentioned a really good point, too, Phantom. Sometimes it's all about timing. And you could take what you learned and you're applying it in a different time, or you're supposed to learn it and it comes here, or, whatever. Timing can be so instrumental in our growth, so totally.
Yeah, it's like it's really important to kind of not put yourself down. A lot of
Yes.
times people put themselves down. So, oh, it's not ready. I'm not good enough. I'm not this, and then they're not willing to kind of self actualize because they
Yes.
have all this imposter syndrome, so they can't accept what's in front of them. Like it could be like an amazing thing, but it's like, I don't have the confidence to do it. I can't embrace that. It's too weird. I don't know what anybody's gonna think. I can't say that because what if I say that, then they're gonna put me in this box. I say, what does
Mhm.
it matter? Like If you're willing to like you get out there and say, "Well, I do see this, I do hear that," and then see where you can go. You could like, but folks are like, "Oh, well, I better not say that because then I'm gonna
Judged.
be perceived in a certain way," you know. Yeah,
Exactly. I always
you seem to have support. You were in a family that supported it, but imagine if you had your ability and you had a structure and say, "Oh, no, 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 yeah, tamp that down."
e this is true. I had a very unconventional upbringing. There's no doubt about it, and, um, I mean, I wasn't, like, really trained, my mom would talk about it, whatever, and I have a lot of family members, people that have, like, very, um pedigree degrees also my family tend to have, not to the extent that I have. But one thing I've always believed, I've never done what I'm supposed to do the way I'm supposed to do it. Like in college, my first semester, I was studying arts and science. I'm like, I'll be a plastic surgeon. I saw an advertisement to be a stockbroker. I got my license, switched my degree around, and usually you do 4 years and then you do 6-month training and whatever. So I've always done things always very differently. But I've always believed, for those that love you, love you. For those that don't. Because you're not going to please everybody. And it's not even you. It's just sometimes people have their own
Mhm.
craziness. And like even now it's so sad because so many people are so about me, enough about me. What do you think about me? And I'm like, the best way to feel good if you're having a moment, my opinion, is to see what you can do to help others, help some animals, help, maybe some people that just need help. Maybe somebody needs you to help them move or do laundry or just sit and talk. If you reach out and you try to help others, it gets you off of your own, I think, despair or sadness, and it gets you back out there because we all have energy. So you're putting good energy out. And actually, your neurons are starting to, change when you do things like that. And that is a scientific fact, according to Dr. James Doty, so major neurosurgeon. And it's funny too, a lot more people scientific are coming to be more accepting of it, which, of this paranormal psychic realm, this energy level. So I think that's really cool. And you being, an IT,
Yeah, I think it's
person,
kind of,
artist. Yeah,
I
totally.
think there's a lot of kind of stuff in the ether. Like, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of like, I deal with a lot of stream of consciousness, kind of happy accident, flow state. And,
Oh, I love
even though
that.
we're kinda in a science-based thing, right? But still kinda just kinda, "Oh, I'm just gonna go and put something on a whiteboard. I'm just gonna go and kinda just see what happens." It's like they're kinda mad scientist type of stuff. Like, I have theories. I know the theories, I know the rules, and I know the process. But then sometimes you kinda like, "What happens if we invert the process? What happens if we do something a little out of sequence?" And it's willing to take those chances, that's
Yes.
where like the creativity happens. And when you're willing to realize like nature isn't always like perfect, there's a lot of imperfection and it causes like mutations, it causes all kinds of weird,
Yeah.
so it doesn't always stay on this mapped thing, it crosses over, it's kind of very chaotic. And there's some
Yes.
rules, but sometimes the rules can be broken. And the scientist finds like, oh, we thought this was a rule, and then we find an exception. It's like, well, it's not a hard and fast rule. There's certain things that can happen, and then that's when you start to realize like the universe is far more complex than what we try to. Oh, I want to try to distill it to what I can understand. But there's a lot of stuff that you can't see, you can't hear. So then
Yes.
maybe like you should be willing to entertain the unknown.
Exactly. Well, it's like, speaking about phantom, right? You take a leaf in curling photography. Remember, like in eighth grade science, you take a leaf, you cut half the leaf off, and you still see the outline, and people get phantom, like if they lose a limb or whatever. Like, and then you do some curling
Yeah,
photography, you
yeah.
could still see the energy, which, that states something in of itself. It just kind of reinforces or you know, how the left brain works with the right brain. You do binary numbers, your zeros and ones and whatever you do in your tech end. And then, yes, you have your creative side where you're doing your music and you get into like some sort of like hypnotic, melodic, thing that you do, which I think is super cool, by the way.
Yeah, it's just kind of like a flow state. You kind of get a lot of artists will say that when we really get into it, we kind of get in a trance. Have you ever seen a
Yes.
musician like when they're on stage and they kind of get in this zone and it's almost like they don't even see the audience anymore? I mean, they kind of feel them, but they're kind of in the zone, like in the middle of their
Oh,
solo or like they're in this zone. It's like, and it's like they don't have to worry about being scared of the audience or being uptight. It's like it just you get into this flow. And with the
Ex
artist, you can see it like in real time. Like with
Oh, you
writers,
can.
you can't see when they're in the room doing it, but like with artists, you can see it, and you're like, wow, like everybody can do that. But some people think, oh, I can't do that because I'm not John Lennon, or I'm not, you know,
Jeffrey Osborne, yeah,
Santana, I'm not Hendrix, I'm not this. Yeah, you can't do it. Everybody has that. They do it. Everybody kind of does that in their normal day. You kind of riff things, and then you're like, oh,
that's
it feels comfortable. But then you don't embrace it because you're like, oh, I got to plan everything.
it's so true, and it's also like when you're driving, how you know how you zone out, and then you're like, "Oh my god, like, I just got here, how did that happen? 20 miles, I
That's
don't
all.
remember." You're like
But
on
I get
pilot,
there.
yeah. Just hope you don't get pulled over if you're like a little dead foot, but it's so true though, you could see that.
And I think it's just important, like if people start to embrace what you're talking about, like intuitive insights, and then maybe people who dive into it more and start to realize like the psychic energies
Mhm,
around, and don't like dismiss it. Because I think it's people can be so dismissive of things. They say, oh, it's that's this, that's a cult, that's that, and they get scared of it. But if you actually, start to look like you say, the things that can show there's evidence of it, right? So that if that's what
mhm.
you need to prove to you it's okay, that's you, right? If other people say, well, I don't need that, it's like if I look into it and I start to feel it, like I feel it. So it's kind of like up to each individual, like what their comfort level, but is I think it's just being willing to kind of maybe entertain it.
I think that's the key, being open enough, having fun. It's always surprising though when you get people that are really the people I find that can be very discriminative about it, or they're so extreme negative about it. You look at their world and you see a lot of unhappiness. A little bit of skepticism, I think, is fine. You got to have it anywhere. But I think when you see the extremes, it's like you're missing out on a lot. And when you really listen, like I know Forbes magazine, there's been several magazines that have come out. They a lot of times will say intuition because the word psychic still is a little too unnerving. But let's face it, if you're getting information outside of your normal range of physical senses, right? It's definitely call it the pit in your stomach intuition or psychic. But they're starting to write about it. There's been quite a bit of information. Like I said, Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, they'll say, I use my intuition. And of course you do. Some of the world, George
Yeah,
Washington, Abraham Lincoln. I mean, you can go on and on. Um,
yeah. It's just like it's a
so
feel. I
many.
mean, a lot of military generals,
Yeah,
you
Colin
read the
Powell.
generals, like the history of war. They got your gut feelings, right? You got all your
Yeah.
experience, and you got your gut. And there's sometimes you
Ex-
got to go with your gut, right?
Well,
Because sometimes what you see isn't actually what is there.
it's so
you know,
true.
and that's hard for people to
Well, it's
get.
so funny because, like, you can also look at, like, dogs or cats, and, like, you might notice, like, all of a sudden they're acting strange, and then all of a sudden the next day you get an earthquake, so you get, like they kinda know ahead of time, or
Yeah, they pick
sometimes
up
you
on
look at, exactly, they're looking up into the sky, and you're like, "Who are you looking at?" And, um, it's crazy. I know one time I did a walkthrough with somebody on a haunted place. I said, "Look, there's an orb above Dan's head," and somebody took a picture, and sure as anything, there was an orb. Nobody else could see it. I said, "There's an orb." So it's kind of funny. So I guess the moral of the story, some people have more tuned in senses, but we all have at least that gut feeling that definitely, um, can help us get to where we need to go if we're smart. Some of us aren't, but I always say, listen
Yeah, I
to it
think
because
everybody can kinda understand, like, the vibe. Yeah, if
right,
you think about it, like,
exactly.
everybody's had that bad vibe from, like, a
Yep,
room or from a person in the room or some kind of environment. You're in the
yep,
woods, it's like, I get a bad vibe about this place, and it's like, you can't pin it down, but there's something weird, and you're like, if you're in tune to it, and like
yep,
like I said, like the Cherokee, you go in the woods, you can feel the spirits in the woods. You can feel the spirit of the river. And if you go to certain places, there's certain energy more than other places. And then like
exactly.
if you're in tune to that, then you pick up on it. If you're kind of oblivious to that, you're wearing your Walkman. It's like, I don't feel anything. I don't see anything. It's like, okay. but you're not listening to the woods. Like, so I guess we never got to pick it up when you got your Walkman on. It's like,
And you hope that the spirit doesn't push you into the water.
because you're trying to isolate it. You're not, yeah, yeah, you're walking into a place and you're trying to like not be in the place. And that's why I see some
Exactly.
people like they purposely don't want, they kind of force it out of their lives because they don't want to embrace it. So they try to replace it with something else.
Exactly. Well, it's like when we had the eclipse. So I was down at the falls when we had it. And I grew up in the falls. And I got to tell you, I was driving home. My house is about 40 minutes away. I could not keep my eyes open. And the next day, I was so exhausted. As soon as I got home, I'm like, I got to go to bed. I could not get over how tired I was. It drained my energy. There's such a connection. And I know a lot of people felt that
Hmm.
experience. So, I mean, it goes to show us, though, we're all connected. Always try to treat yourself
Yeah, it's
and
a
others.
universal power. Yeah.
Exactly,
Well, yeah, there's
exactly.
all these universal forces, and there's cosmic things going on. There's earthly
Yes.
things going on, and there's like, all this stuff in between interdimensional things going on. If you get into that, and it's like worlds within worlds within worlds, and you're
Oh my
picking up,
god.
you could be picking up all kinds of things, and it's like overwhelming if you're too sensitive. Like if you're too sensitive,
Yeah.
you might pick up too much, and then well, how do you discern? Have you ever felt like you got too like an
Mhm.
overload, or you've been able to not get overloaded?
I think over years you learn to probably process it better, but there are times that I do feel overloaded. I mean, years ago, I was up at God's hour, like at 4. I went to go get some Christmas gifts for the holidays, and I thought, well, I'll get to the store early. I think it was Macy's or Coffins at the time. I get there at 6. I grab a bunch of stuff. It's 6:20. I'm like, great, I can get out before the crowds really, because they opened up at 6. I'm like, I just need a few quick things. I'm standing in line. There are 3 people ahead, and there are a couple people behind, but this guy was such crazy energy. I had to set everything down and leave. And I'm like, "Oh, this really sucks," because I got up at 4. I could not take his energy. I felt like I was getting, knives in my back. Rarely
Too
do I get
much.
it that bad. Yeah. The Eclipso, I mean, I did migraine. I mean, because the energy was awful. I mean, it was cool, but it was so strong for somebody like me and somebody obviously like you that, I'm down in the
Power.
falls and it's right there. Yeah, exactly, and I'm like, "Oh my god," I feel like the little ever ready battery is, like, depleting, but, you learn. I mean, there are times, like, I've traveled a lot of landscapes throughout the years, going out of body, seeing the different landscapes, seeing all sorts of crazy stuff, and just being able to learn from those experiences how to, like, modulate my energy or moderate it, so it's not so blown apart, but I don't know. I guess with a name like Reese's Pieces, anything can happen, right? The energy goes, so it is
Yeah.
what it is. And
Well, it's just
I mean,
like over time,
energy. Yes.
you kind of got a
It,
muscle memory for your psychic capability, right? You learn how to
yep.
manage it, so you've learned, how to use it. Like, if people don't embrace capabilities that they have, they don't really learn about it. Like, if you don't really dive into the mind, then you don't know how to like calm yourself. You don't know how to meditate. You don't know how to get rid of
Yes.
like thoughts that are like racing. Like once you get disciplined, like in the Eastern cultures, there's a lot of discipline to show
Yes, there
people,
is.
oh yeah, you can actually, if you got these racing thoughts, if you have all these things, you can control that. But like in a Western mindset, oh, I don't know if we believe that, so I don't know if you can control that, so go get a pill to control it. Well, you could actually do it, but
Yes.
if you don't believe in it, then you can't do it.
Exactly. And I'm like, I think that's what's wrong with our society too. We rely too much on, pills and medicine when we really can just figure it out on our own. But we're not really trained like the Eastern, schools of thoughts. So yeah, which is kind of unfortunate, but
The thousands
yeah,
of years of like assessing humanity and
yes,
understanding the mind and diving into it and writing about it in oral histories and all kinds of evidence in Chinese and Japanese culture and all kinds of cultures that show the discipline that you could have,
yes.
but the Western society kind of poo-poo that. I don't know. And now it's like people in this age are like, oh, maybe they have something there. It's like now more people are saying, oh, maybe I should think about that. And it's not just out of matter of fact dismissed. People are willing to entertain it now, a lot more. And that's interesting to me because I think you should try to have we're citizens of the planet,
Oh, I
not
love
like of
that.
the nation. So we should take advantage of everything that's here, but
I
sometimes
think
we
you're
get
right.
so narrow and say, well, I can't do that unless it's USA. It's like, well, maybe not everything's USA.
Exactly, we are citizens. Well, too, I mean, it kinda goes to the point you just brought up a great point. When you think about it, people are always looking outside, and this is one way, to really find happiness. A lot of times people don't realize by just touching in these types of, experiences and modalities, you can actually enjoy your life. You can have a more fulfilling life because I think people look outward for answers. Some of it's okay, but you got to go inward and just simple,
Yeah,
like quieting your mind and meditating, just
yeah,
slowing it down, all of the above. Like, what do you think when Moses walked the planet? They were pretty psychic, but they didn't have all the distractions, the technologies, and the lifestyles, and the da 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 da
yeah,
da, the crazy things. At the end of the day, you gotta when you get to the end of the road, you gotta say, did I leave this world a better place than what I did when I came in? Was I so self-focused that I neglected, to help my fellow neighbor, my fellow, animal, and try to be kind, so that your
so I think
reincarnation will
that's
be better.
well, I think it's a good place to leave it. We always go, takes like little time to hit the hour mark when we actually hit the hour. But
Yes.
I do want to let people know we do have your www.karynreece.com, and we didn't talk about what happens if people click on that. So if people visit your URL, what happens when they connect to you there? They can contact you or
Yep,
find
they
out
can
about a lot of
contact
the
me.
things you do.
Yep, I do all sorts of stuff, obviously one-on-ones and whatever. If I'm doing TV shows or, podcasts like yours, I'll have that listed. So, and book appointments, find out more about me,
That's
that
awesome.
type of thing. So, but I appreciate you having me. It's been such a wonderful experience. Your energy is amazing. Phantom, you are the best. And I love your thoughts. I think you are point on. You have great advice. No wonder why you've got a great audience because you just nail it. And that's important. And you're left right brain like I am. So you're nuts like me. So that's good.
That's awesome. Well, thank you very much for being on the show and have a great night. And we'll get this out there. We were live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, but it'll be on all the major platforms the podcast can be listened to or watched by tomorrow. And I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast.
Oh my God. Thank you.